All right, I'm going to demonstrate a tuck hold on the rings. And this is basically to get into the strength that's required to do a full leg lift. And what you usually see people doing is basically kind of doing really sloppy leg lifts. There'll be bends at the knees, feet are flexed up. It's pretty intense, and they're just kind of pulling everything up. And there's nothing wrong with working on the position, keep in mind. But I do think this is a much more effective route to getting into that, to the point where you'll be able to lift the legs up straight with the toes pointed, and maybe even come through for a full skin the cat movement here and really get that core control. Now, what you have to build up is strength at the hip flexors, and I'm talking about the muscles that hinge the hip and close the hinge and pull the knees in close. And the thing is, this is really, you're talking about muscles that go through the pelvis and join on to the femur bone, the thigh bone, all right? The lower leg doesn't have a whole lot to do with that. Now, if you've got your feet further forward, obviously that's going to feel heavier because you've got more weight away from the center of your body, from the point that's lifting. And if you've got the knee bent and the foot down, this is going to be easier to get your knee to this position. But most people can do this without a whole lot of effort. What you're really trying to train to get strong is to go through the extreme shortened range of the muscles at the hinge, which means working to get the knee up as high as possible, pull the thigh as close as you can, and close that gap at the hinge. And that is much tougher to change and to basically train than people really realize. Now, what I would recommend to start is to lengthen that out first, that you're coming from a lengthened position, a stretched position, so that you're not just going to a shortened position where, oh, I just sit like this all day and that's where the muscle wants to be. You want to go past that. And that is a range of motion that most adults do not have because they never get into it. They never really use those muscles because it takes a hell of a lot of effort and a lot of strain. So just on the rings, if I just want to stretch this out, I would just take this from a lunge. So just sinking down, and I'm just going to stretch the right hip flexor here. So I'm bringing the right knee down, pulling that right hip forward, and I can already feel the tension right here in front of the pelvis at the hinge of the hip. So just lengthening that out. And you can go back and forth in the position. You can hold it for time, but keep it active. Keep this hip pulling forward, the back foot side, and the front foot side, pull that hip back. And I'll take it on the other side as well. So again, just sinking in and pulling my left hip forward and the right hip back just to straighten, just to basically stretch out the hip flexor, the hinge. Now, I'm going to bring this up in a tuck position. So basically, I'm just going to lift this, rounding my spine as much as possible, trying to pull the knees in close to my chest. So I'm going to do it from a full hang. So no bend in the elbows, and I'm just lifting up from the shoulders to stay supported. So there's a little activation right at the shoulder joint, and then my feet are lifted. Now, I'm going to pull this in close, and then come down, and again, pull in, and come back down, and pull in, and come back down. And sometimes even just holding that for time, just holding to whatever lift you can for time can be a good way to work it. But going back and forth like that, you're definitely going to feel the activation around the hip flexor. And there's other ways to take it further. You could do one leg at a time. You could put an ankle weight on if you wanted more weight, basically to work the hip flexors with more resistance. You could have some sort of band that's anchored on the floor, maybe hooking your feet, pulling up against that resistance. And there's a bunch of ways to work on that, and that helps carry over to a lot of other movements, whether it's on the rings or you're just doing it on the floor without any other extra hardware. Hope this helps.